Good evening, Uganda. After a 15-year long wait, Uganda this week put pen to paper on a final investment decision into its oil. Whether it's too early or on time remains a matter of debate. But when the black gold seeps to the surface in 2025, it will meet a world of change demands, a shift to clean and renewable energy. So is Uganda taking a sharp gamble, or is it on the path to commercial and national success? Will oil revenues, unlike all revenues of government, be used effectively and efficiently? Will Uganda be the oil miracle or the oil curse? Tonight, on The Spot, we place Uganda's top crop on oil at the heart of this simmering debate. Let me introduce my panel this evening, one by one. I have Penina Aherwa, Director, Technical Support Services, Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
I have Koti Paul Lakuma, Research Fellow, Economic Policy Research Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here.
And I have a man with a good name. I don't know how I'm going to say this. The only time I say this name, I was saying it to the love of my life. But you are Hani Malinga, Director of Petroleum Ministry of Energy. Malinga, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Let me begin with you, Penny, because you are right close to me here. When we talk about final investment decision, especially on the 1st of February, everybody was saying it's a good day for Uganda. In what sense?
Okay. Thank you so much. And indeed, many Ugandans have been asking. It's been over 15 years. And you're just talking about final investment decision being made now. We thought it had been made years ago, and that's why we've been seeing some work being done in the sector. Well, just to say, final FID, or the final investment decision, it can be positive, it can be negative, but for the case of Uganda, it was positive. And it's when companies say, or investors in a particular project, say we are taking forward this project because we have the money, or we have raised the money, and because we know it will make money in future. Now, for that to happen, it's a process. It is not a day's event, and indeed what you saw on Tuesday was a long journey to get there. Like I said, companies say we are good to take forward this project because we have the money for it and we think it is going to make money. Now that means a lot. It means, first of all, the projects are technically feasible, they pass the regulatory tests, and they are commercially feasible at the same time. So for Uganda to achieve FID for the major projects in this country, which you've heard about, Telenga, Kingfisher, and the ECOP, it means those projects have passed those tests.
So in other words, the investors have confidence they can put their money and even make money in Uganda. They are no longer guessing. It has been, studied and proven that here, this is working.
Exactly.
This is what it means.
Exactly.
So, but how does that translate into real money for Ugandans, to be specific, for the local communities in Bunyoro and Acholi, where the petroleum is, Mr. Malinga?
How does it translate?
Into money.
Okay, thank you for that question. Before we come to the money, I just want to add what my colleague has just said. Each stage, first of all, we have what we call production sharing agreement. An investor is convinced to come to Uganda, to a country which has a natural resource. We don't know the potential, but through the studies, you find yourself saying, okay, I can go to the next stage. So we had first exploration activities. They made a discovery, the 2006 discovery, commercial. Then they did the appraisals. After appraisals, they went and came up with the field development plans and other studies. Basing on those studies, they said, okay, we are ready to apply for a production license. Now, when we issue a production license, it now enables them to go to the next stage of development and later production. Now, when you talk of translating into money, it is in many forms. First of all, Bunyoro or the Albertine Graben has been a remote area.
It is still a remote area.
Are you sure?
In most of the places, yes.
Oh, my friend. If you went there in 1992 and you compare 1992 and today, it is totally different. When we used to work there in 1992, ADF were there were no roads, the roads are there. So
apart from the roads, what is in Bunyoro, for heaven's sake? Because you're going to have tens of thousands of people descend on that city called the oil city. It will need, you know, the infrastructure. Apart from the roads, you'll need hospitals, for example. You'll need so many things to serve those people there. I don't see those things available.
I can't remember the year. Cabinet came up and said, let us declare the Albertine Graben as a special physical area, physical planning area. So there are the physical plans. If you saw the release of 1992, it's not the release of
but
today.
The physical plans you're talking about, Mr. Malinga, so have not translated into a development that, for example, is going to house tens of thousands of people, because now that they have signed FID, it means, in my view, that people are going to start moving into those areas. Where is the social infrastructure for them that is going to house them, that is going to keep them, that if they fall sick, they will have to go and seek medication?
I think that might be a wrong advice, where I said that now let us all go there. You can still be in Kampala and offer services in Bulisa. So there will be some people who will go there, but not all. And with the physical plans in place, infrastructure will be built, and eventually it will accommodate people.
Of course, when you have an extractive industry, we expect to have some services that are going to help the people working in that industry, but also the local community there. And I'm asking, for the last 15 years, when you knew this resource was going to happen, when you were sure the FID was going to be signed, where is the robust social infrastructure that is going to help tens of thousands of people coming to Bunyoro or to Acholi?
15 years ago, we didn't know that we'd reach this stage, the final investment decision.
You've been flying blind.
We have been doing investment decision at each stage. But now we have reached where we are saying, okay, we are going to have serious infrastructure. It needs a lot of money. That's why we have this we call it final investment decision, whereby there will be more activities to enable to have the required infrastructure.
Let me take you to Mr. Lakuma. The readiness of Bunyoro, the readiness of Acholi in handling the population that is going to maybe come there in a matter of months, I suppose. Where is their readiness?
Well, what I would say, this cannot be left to the public alone, to the public sector alone. It's a collaboration of both the public and the private sector. As Mr. Hania said, the government has made the physical plans. Therefore, this calls for some investments, some part of the investments by the private sector, especially in provision of social infrastructure, that is health and education. The government has done largely part of what it was supposed to do, that is to provide the physical infrastructure, mostly the roads, which most of them are done, and provide other issues such as security for the investment to take place, provide the other transport infrastructure such as the airport. Then there will be collaborations with the private sector to see the social infrastructure comes up.
Let me refresh your mind, Lakuma, because this has been a 15-year journey.
Yeah.
Almost 7 years ago, they promised potential investors in Uganda to put money in Bunyoro, to invest in the oil sector because the money is going to come. Indeed, some people went and borrowed money from the bank. Some people sold their homes, mortgaged their homes so that they can get money and invest. I know of a gentleman who bought wheel loaders and tractors and graders and packed them in Bukoto. People have lost money because government was indecisive. They didn't know what was going to happen when. Where are they going to hope this time, to get the hope this time around, to say, you know what, this time it's real? Are you aware that people have lost money because government was having that procrastination?
Yeah, like any other business, there are risks, and for you to be a business person, you must take risk. Like Penina mentioned, the final investment decision can go either way. An investor can decide not to off-take the project or take up the project. So there's that uncertainty. But thank God now the project has been determined to be bankable by the investors. So people are going to recover their money, which they lost.
But you know for sure that the people who rushed to invest, you know, buy land, build hotels, buy equipment, because government had told them, you know what, prepare now to get the money, and they have made losses, others have left even Kampala. Penna, you know that?
Yeah, and maybe to respond to that, in addition to what Paul was saying, even now, I think as I was coming in, there was a program on TV where today another milestone had been reached, where we were promoting the opportunities in housing and in agriculture. And what we are saying is, yes, they could have invested back then, but perhaps they lacked maybe full information, because some of them who had
provide that information.
Some of them
they wanted the information of government, of people like you.
No. I'm not saying we told them there was uncertainty, but in most cases, when you're doing something, do not put all your eggs in one basket. So even now, as we promote the opportunities in the oil and gas sector, there is going to be a time where we will reach the decline. So there has to be a sustainability plan. Even as you're investing in trucks, you're investing in so many things, you've got to think about that decline phase. Where will you take your facilities and so on? So you have to plan for that, and that's why we would like during this development phase to ensure the other sectors are also boosted, so that when we reach the decline phase, the other sectors are up and running and boosted, so people can also, you know, engage in those sectors.
I understand, honey, that you're supposed to give people something. There's a policy of local content, right? So that they too can partake. But we're talking about a highly advanced, you know, technological required kind of investment that Ugandans may not understand. But also, it is requiring colossal sums of money. How do Ugandans co-invest to be able to partake the local content, to enjoy the local content policy?
You know, Patrick, for those ones who are smart, they have already done plans. There are some activities which have been undertaken, and you know, with the new law in place, we are required to go for joint venture. So you find there is an international partner playing with the local one, and we are promoting that. We have, for example, these environmental studies. Most of them have been done by Ugandans, with little input from experts from outside. So likewise, we are encouraging companies to come on board, but to be careful when they are coming on board. We don't want the other case which you have mentioned, where somebody goes full board, then later you take a risk. I mean, you lose out. So the policy is encouraging companies to come on board, and also we are trying to see, if possible, to do some bit of funding so that we can enhance their financial capacity for them to participate. So
if you are maybe to elaborate more, where can Ugandans, in which areas? Because if you have an investment that requires $200 million, and maybe you need a local funder, you're not going to easily get somebody who's going to maybe put in $40 million. $2
million might be on the high side, but if there's an activity which needs maybe $10 million, you can get a funder who can say, I'll bring 5, you also do the 5, then the next time maybe you go for a bigger activity. For example, we have seen companies grow, though there was this challenge, but we have seen companies from nowhere, they have been competing. We have companies which have even gone outside the country to do the same services they have been offering here.
No, talking about...
For example, I want to tell you, in 1998, we had the company handling logistics, MSL. We used to stay in these small tents. But if you go now, they have powerful containers, fabricated houses, which is internationally accepted, from tents to those type of infrastructure.
Paul, I understand the conglomerates we're dealing with have these kind of business ventures around the world. And for the services that are going to be offered in Hoima, they are not any different from the services being offered in their other fields, in Ghana, in Venezuela, or anywhere. It is also possible that the French company can pick whoever was giving them a service, like catering or whatever, and say, you know what, let's go to Uganda, I'm giving you this job. Is government really going to stop them? Well, if, for example, Patrick Vitaturi or whoever also wanted to do catering, isn't it possible that a French company that has invested $3 billion, $10 billion, can twist the country and say, you know what, this is my person, I want him to serve. After all, he's of proven performance. I have history with them.
Well, I think there are some legislation which are in the pipeline to ensure there's national content. The definition of national content may vary. May mean a company stationed in Uganda, not necessarily owned by Ugandan, but that will ensure local participation by local businesses. Then to supplement what the director was saying, not all the processes are as complex or as expensive as you perceive. There's a capital expenditures which are very complex, complex engineering works, drilling material, which Ugandans may not be able to participate immediately in the short term. They may do that in the long term. But there are also activities funded by working capital, like supplies of food, supplies of clothing, supplies of education, supply of health, supply of entertainment, supply of tourism. That will be done by Ugandans.
You just said something very fundamental, that a company can be foreign but registered in Uganda, and then it will be understood to be a Ugandan company. This is a serious loophole, because that can be exploited by foreign companies. Just come to Uganda, they came the other year, they registered, and now they are Ugandan. Money is paid from France or from Beijing, comes to Uganda and directly goes back.
No, but
that is a possibility.
But the advantage here is your residence is in Uganda. So once you are resident in Uganda, you are subject to income taxation. So you pay taxes, which will go to finance education, finance infrastructure, help Ugandans in other way. So that's good. The bad part is having a company operating in Uganda, but as residents in Mauritius or in Netherlands, then it's not it files its taxes in another jurisdiction or in a tax haven. So you're losing two-way. They are exploiting your resource and they're not paying taxes. But if a company is foreign, I have no problem with a foreign company, registered as a resident of Uganda. That means URA will be picking 30% of its output every year. And that's good enough.
But you see, if it was purely local, perhaps it wouldn't be repatriating all the funds. You're only targeting at taxing them. Well, that's okay. Yeah. But if they are local, probably that money would be invested here and it stays here, and you tax them more.
Yeah, but we must also recognize that we cannot block importation of skills. There are some, we have to take time to learn from people. Most of the advanced countries which were less developed in the last century, there was something called learn by doing. So there are skills also we have to invite foreigners to teach us, so that we look at them and we imitate what
but you see, I have seen some companies that are registered in Uganda, they're actually foreign, and the only skill they have is supplying maram and sand. So is that the skill you're talking about?
No, those are not the typical companies.
Yeah, but you see, that is what happens. Anyway, let me move away from that point, Penna. I'm told in the initial phase...
Maybe before we move away from that point, because I want to correct, I don't know, the impression. It's not only that when you come here and register, then you qualify to be a Ugandan. No, there are other areas that you need to fulfill. You come, incorporate in the country, your labor force should be 70%, 75%, 70% Ugandan, and you should be adding value or utilizing raw materials from Uganda. So you must have established a facility or a base, you're utilizing goods and services, you're employing Ugandans.
It's also possible that 25% of the foreign labor force could take 90% of the budget.
Well, we go, right now we are not going into the details of looking at the payroll in terms of value, how much is going to Ugandans and so on, but we have a criteria. Even the 75%, you should be having a particular quota within management, technical, and support. So you will not have the 75% down under support. We want to have them spread out from management, technical, and down. So I just want to correct the qualification of a Ugandan. You incorporate here, employ Ugandans, and utilize the goods and services from the country.
Honey, the 10 billion or $15 billion initially that's supposed to be invested in the Albert and Graben, does that include the building or the construction of a refinery?
No. The final investment decision which was done, which was announced, is for 3 projects. The East African Crude Pipeline, the Tilenga, and the Kingfisher. We are yet to have the FID for the refinery.
So what is going to happen in Tilenga and Kingfisher?
Tilenga and Kingfisher,
which I think Tilenga is in Acholi, right?
Tilenga is in Bugungu, in Bulisa.
Okay.
Tilenga is in Ngabi, the name. We just coined the name. Now that Tilenga is a central processing facility. It will be receiving crude from both in Acholi land and within Bulisa. Then it separates the impurities. Then after it has separated that, then it is pumped to
it's a processing unit.
It is a processing unit with many facilities to make sure that it is. And if you go there now, you'll find that the area is being cleared, it is being leveled, 1.1 kilometer by 1.5 kilometer. That's the area. Then the same is going to be done at Kingfisher. It might be slightly smaller, and I think around 11th of this month, they are starting the construction. And it is even a local company which is going to do that work. And if you go to Tilenga still, you'll find that as much as it is a foreign company which has the contract, the main contract, but the most players are Ugandan companies.
So now, because if we have to wait for the final investment decision on the refinery, and I'm told one of the reasons why there was a lot of delay because President Yoweri Museveni was interested in having a refinery. And he didn't want to look like other countries where you only sell crude. But now, is it in our hands to have a refinery built in Uganda, in Hoima, or it is in the hands of the multinationals?
The refinery is a government project. The crude export pipeline is for the joint ventures. So we have to have a win-win situation. The first condition was that no crude will leave this country. Then we realized that in case if the production is high, what happens with the surplus? You'll find that the market will not be there. So that's why we allowed the export pipeline. But there are conditions that is the refiner to receive first, then the surplus will go to the crude export pipeline.
So how did you go to a project or a business arm that was initially not really what the chief executive of the country was interested in? Because what he was interested in, if I have listened to him correctly, was a refinery, and this was something else. And these others were just to be extras.
Patrick, I think on Tuesday, he hinted on it, said that I was on this side, but later, with negotiation, with the technical input, we agreed to have a win-win situation.
No, because actually, Paul,
yes,
this government invited in a Russian company, I think it was called Rostock. Even the bids were given out. The building should have started years back. What happened?
Of course, like Director is saying, maybe at that time the information was not enough to determine certain decisions. But as informations become available, and which I agree with, I think it's correct to change your mind.
We are dealing with a strategic resource, and we have a government that is not being strategic in dealing with its business, because how do you even reach a level of looking for, people to build a refinery? The bids are open. you select. One was Russian and the other is South Korean. And I mean, how haphazard can a government be?
Okay, if you can allow me to come in here. I don't think it was haphazard, and it wasn't as a result of government to say we stop here. You recall, I think at that time, the US had imposed some sanctions on Russia, and so the collapse of those negotiations were related to that. But I also want to say why we kind of yielded to allowing an export pipeline in addition to the refinery. It is also strategic for us to access the international market. You realize that if we had gone with a refinery alone, we would remain domestic and maybe just accessing the regional market for petroleum products. So it is also strategic for us to access the international market. And actually, it was about optimizing the economics of these projects, because it would mean, if you're going with a refinery alone, it would mean you remain in a low-level production, and you know money today is better than money tomorrow. So we tried to optimize the production, the level of production, and have two outlets for our crude oil: the refinery in country and then accessing the international market.
Patrick, I want just to add on. Rostec, you never know, they might come back. The same way Total, in the 80s, Total was here with Shell and Petrofina. Shell and Total left Petrofina. The first agreement we had it with Petrofina, but now today we are seeing Total Energies is back. So it is not that they have left, they'll never come. They go and do economics and later they come back.
Gentlemen and lady, hold on to your points, because we're going to take a break, and on the spot, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amar, and my guests this evening are Penina Ahebwa, who is Director Technical Support Services at the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. We have Mr. Hani Malinga, Director Petroleum at the Ministry of Energy, and Koti Paul Lakuma, Research Fellow, Economic Policy Research Center. And we're discussing the oil and gas sector having signed the final investment decision. I'm interested in knowing what kind of conversation you have had with the local people where the oil is being extracted. I don't know whether you've been having barazas every day. Why I'm asking this is because if you don't have them in and buy into this whole project, you may find fights like we have seen in other parts of the world. They're going to land in Nigeria and other places. Have you had constant conversation with them? What kind of royalties? Do they know what is going to be paid to them? For example, the cultural institution in Bunyoro or in Acholi?
Okay, if that is directed to me. The conversations have not only been with the communities where the projects are, but I will focus on that. The conversations have been there, but also what has happened in that region speaks for the projects. Like Mr. Malinga said, if you had been there years before, and indeed that's why you were still calling it, how did you call it?
It's still rural, they're still villages.
Yeah, rural. If you went there now, I can tell you, maybe you would even get lost, because the area, has been.
I know this place very well.
The area has been opened up.
Don't forget that you and I went to the same school in that region at one point.
Yes.
So now I know that place very well.
It depends when you were last there. If you've taken a while without going there, I can tell you, you will not recognize it. So first of all, what has happened in that area speaks for the projects. I can tell you there is a network of 12 tarmac roads which are close to completion, and so the area has been opened up to the rest.
There's no doubt Bunyoro now is the most tarmacked region of Uganda.
Yes,
granted.
And in addition to that,
beyond that, I don't see anything.
I'm getting there. In addition to that, the area has been opened to the international market because of the new international airport, the second international airport. Those are huge opportunities for that area. And so what we are doing right now is to awaken them that this is an opportunity before you. You can mobilize yourselves, provide, for example, the construction materials that are required, the food that will be required. Quite a number of Ugandans or expatriates are going to move into that area to work.
How does the airport help that local man in Kiriatete, that woman in Kiziramfumbi, that old man on Museja Mukuru Hill?
No,
How does it help?
I'm getting there. Everything has the first step. So we have awakened them to the opportunities. Don't think everyone is at zero in that area. We have some good farmers who only need a small support to scale up and to standardize so they can supply the oil and gas sector. And I can tell you, once you have qualified to supply the oil and gas sector, you can meet the international market standard through the airport. So, and right now we are also working with the oil companies to work out a community content strategy. Look at what they are able to supply in terms of quantity, in terms of standard, and that will be obtained from the community. But also a number of projects to skill and train and make sure these people within the communities where we are working grab the jobs, some of the jobs that are coming up. Some of those projects are ongoing, working with the Ministry of Education. Some low-level casual laborers are going to come from that project, from within the project areas. So quite a lot of opportunities that are coming ahead for them, and the mobilization is on, and it will not stop. And I can tell you there's a huge movement, a huge progress in terms of mobilizing these communities.
I've had some complaints, honey, that sometimes officials like you come from Kampala and go straight to where the projects are, that there's no conversation with the local communities, there's no conversation with the local government in the areas. And I've heard them, try to complain about how you have behaved from Kampala and the conglomerates, them being left aside. And that could actually sow seeds of distress in future.
Patrick, I think you're 100% correct. But we are trying to correct that image, because previously, during those days, the early 90s, it was very difficult to work in that region. So the first point of call was the district. You go to the district chairperson, you report the police and others. Then you go to the local ones and you tell them we are around. And I want to tell you that when we used to work in the park, on the parks, we used to have the rangers. Whenever the poachers were arrested in the process of working, we would tell them that this is not your job. You are here to guard us against what? The animals. And we became friendly to the people. Whenever they said that US has come, that is the vehicles we to use. They know these are friendly. They are not going to harm us. Now, to add on what Penina said, skilling. Under different interventions, government has got funding through World Bank to make sure that the 15 districts within the Alberta and Guaben are given opportunity to trade. We have students who are at Kigumba, we have students who are at Sunnymaker and other training institutes to get the required skill for them to participate in that. So all those ones are positive impact. They will result in positive impact to the people in the region.
So, Paul, the oil resource is in a pristine environment, an ecologically sensitive area. Yeah. And for us to be able to extract that oil, we have to be very careful not to cut out some kind of an ecological terror, because it's also a finite resource. Are you confident that the oil will be extracted and our environment and the ecology that is so sensitive in that region will also be preserved?
Yeah, I think so. I think the companies which have won the licenses are experienced. This is not their first project. They've done this elsewhere in the world. Total is all over West Africa and Latin America, so I think they will do a good job. So is the Chinese company CNOOC. However, speaking broadly on what oil can do, oil is definitely a game changer for Uganda. As you have heard, the revenue it's going to bring, non-oil revenue, 2 billion a year. The projects themselves you have mentioned, up to 15-16 billion for this FID, where 40% will go in, will focus on supply of goods and services which will benefit the local community. But broadly, the government needs to do much more in terms of the broad macroeconomic policy, is to make sure oil, apart from the benefits Penina and Director Malinga has mentioned, the direct benefits of those who are being skilled to participate in the sector, the host communities, the host districts. Apart from those benefits, oil could also be used as a game changer for the economy to make sure the country moves. Oil itself is a primary sector, but oil can be used. It has been used elsewhere. I can give examples of Indonesia. Indonesia used oil to support its education sector, and now they are one of the most skilled and have high human development indices. In Uganda here, oil can also be used to change the other industries broadly, economically.
You know, examples you're giving me, Paul, are examples outside of Africa. We have so many examples in Africa where countries have had the oil resource for decades and has not helped them to take their people out of poverty. Countries like Equatorial Guinea, countries like Angola, countries like Nigeria, actually, even in some cases, there's no oil in on their pumps. Sometimes you find a line of people trying to get fuel. I mean, how are we going to be any different if the big brothers who have been there before have actually not helped themselves improve their livelihoods using the oil resource?
Yeah, and that's why even the delay is a blessing, so that you can pick lessons from your big brothers. You know, it's good to be sometimes to be the last one. Pick the mistakes your brother made so that you don't repeat them. And one of the issues I was addressing is to ensure the size of the primary sectors in Uganda is reduced and Uganda industrializes. Oil can be used to power that agenda.
Where do you get your confidence tonight, knowing that we have not been very good at handling public resources? We're going to have $2 billion into our economy, but when you look at the history of Uganda and handling money, we have not performed well.
I would say the issues of leakages are isolated cases. Uganda has done very well in some aspects in terms of handling public resources. In some cases, Uganda is top 10 in Africa in some areas. Maybe of recent there has been deterioration of some aspects.
I have seen, for example, we have borrowed money to build roads, but whatever projects we are doing, when you compare our, you know, the kind of money that we pay and others in the region, ours is colossal. The good example is the Entebbe Expressway. And of course, that money will be brought in the country. We want to have some projects at an exorbitant fee. At the end of the day, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people are benefiting instead of benefiting all. Because that is, there are many examples.
Yes.
We have lost a lot of money in these projects.
Yeah,
moreover, borrowed money.
But what I wanted to address is, one, reduce the size of the oil can be used to reduce the size of the primary sector in the economy. Secondly, we should ensure that the government does not use oil to play a larger role in the society and dominate the private sector. That would be another big mistake which has happened with our older brothers like Nigeria. And then we should make sure tax capacity is not emasculated by the new resource. You know, Nigeria collects only 5% of GDP in taxes, which is so bad. The budget is largely funded by oil resource, so we should make sure we put together those fiscal regimes so that oil becomes a game changer and drives industrialization in the country.
I think you have brought us a very interesting area, because the fiscal regimes you're talking about, there is a report, I think a World Bank report, in the tourism sector that shows that Uganda can actually get about $12 billion from the tourism sector, and yet Paul is saying we can get $2 billion from the oil sector. Really, if we are to make our priorities right, oil, even though we've talked about it for the last 15 years, should be coming at the end of the line, because our comparative and competitive advantage as a country lies in agriculture and tourism.
Exactly.
And yet we're not putting the same kind of resource
That's the
and
point.
focus.
That's the point I was driving. Oil is 2 billion a year, but there are some capacities, there are some equipment, there are some infrastructure lacking in the agricultural sector and in the tourism sector. So oil could be used. The revenue from oil could be used to close that gap.
Actually, the World Bank report says with minimal investment in the tourism sector, this country could make about $12 billion.
That minimal investment is what oil could do. I think minimal investment could mean $2 billion. Because $2 billion to some countries it's not a lot of money, but for us it is.
We get $1.6 billion from tourism. You combine all our tourism areas. Egypt makes $4 billion from the Nile alone. From the Nile alone. And yet even us here, we could make that money starting from around Pakwach, because there the Nile is navigable and it is gentle. You could put your sundowners and whatever and call the people to come and enjoy and get on the Nile as the sun goes down, them going through that pristine, beautiful place in northern Uganda.
Okay, if I can contribute to that topic. Why I'm very confident that Uganda may not go the path of Nigeria and those examples that we have seen where oil has turned out to be a curse is we have also focused on the development phase. We are not actually focusing on the proceeds that are going to come out of the sale of crude oil, the 2 billion you're talking about. We want to make the most out of this 15 or 10 billion through a national content, and I can assure you, if we do everything that we have to do, our GDP before even first oil is going to jump to even beyond 50 billion from the 37 that we are at now. So we are focusing on, first of all, national content. Our estimations are that out of that 10 billion, if we do everything we have to do, 35% of that is going to be domiciled here. But also there is a big opportunity in sectoral linkages. This development phase is going to create a lot of demand. We expect over 160,000 workers on the project, but we also expect over 1 million people to move in that region. All that is demand. Demand for agricultural products, demand for housing, demand for healthcare services. And if we can focus and game up these sectors, we can benefit a lot during this development phase. Even, I don't know, before first oil has been received here, this economy will have been changed by this development phase. So in my view as Ugandans, we really need to focus on the development phase, because the 2 billion, first of all, is small, like you've said, and indeed some of the sectors we are focusing on are tourism, because this development phase is going to bring in expatriates who will be interested in tourism, and that's why we want to work with the players in tourism to make sure the facilities are improved and modernized through this development phase.
No. Okay, well, that sounds good. But when you look...
Maybe just...
Yeah, because I'm coming to you, Pani. When you look at Uganda and how and where God has placed us, I believe God placed us in the most beautiful place on the planet. I'll give you an example of Busoga region. In the east of Busoga, you have River Mpologoma. In the south of Busoga, you have Lake Victoria. In the west of Busoga, you have River Nile. In the north of Busoga, I think you have Lake Kyoga. In every village there, you have a river. Talk about any other region in Uganda, it's more or less like that. Half of East Africa's arable land is here in our country. In fact, our black gold is in agriculture. But this country, and you're a government official, puts less than 5% of its budget into the area of agriculture that employs more than 70%. You have the biggest percentage of your population contributing little to the GDP. Why? Because government is not supporting the agricultural sector, where it could be a game changer for Uganda. We got our priorities wrong.
Patrick, you're part of a government, so we have to put our heads together and see if we can increase that 5% to a certain percentage where we can have an impact. there's a question we ask, what have we done? In 2008, we put a policy, the National Oil and Gas Policy. That policy was borrowed by the Ghanaians. The laws which are there, they are provisions. National Environment Authority, there is a new law now, because they saw that the law which was existing had gaps. So there are systems which we have tried to put in place before we get the first oil. So there are systems which government has put in place to make sure that the interests of the public are catered for.
Paul, the world has waged a war on fossil fuel.
Yeah.
By the time our oil gets out of the ground, with 2025, the next 5 years that follow to 2030, the world will be phasing out. And they are looking for cleaner energy and renewable energy. What a bad timing for Uganda.
I wish to disagree. One, it will take a little bit longer. In my estimate, I think 100 years for the world to fully move from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Just imagine how long will it take for a jet to fly using batteries, using lithium batteries?
Do you know, yesterday, electric vehicles, the sale of electric vehicles overtook diesel vehicles in Europe for the first time yesterday.
Okay.
They sold more electric powered vehicles than diesel powered vehicles for the first time yesterday.
Yeah, but the point I was making is that's for yesterday's sale. Yesterday's sale could be 50 electric cars and maybe 10 fossil fuel driven cars. That does not show the long run trajectory. But
it's a point at where we are headed.
Yeah, we're headed there. But the world is not at a place where we can absolutely replace fossil fuel. Then another thing, you have a resource which God has given you, and then you want to move away from it and do something else. I think use what you have. What we have is oil. We can't start dreaming of renewable energy, yet we have oil. We have to use it to spur our development. That's my thinking. And other countries have done it. The Arabian countries have done it. The US itself.
Internal combustion engine is being phased out, Paul. You know that?
I think we still have a window where fossil fuel will still continue to be influential. For the next 100 years, I can promise you that. For the next 100 years, fossil fuel will still be used globally.
Gentlemen,
side by side with renewable energy.
Gentlemen and lady, hold on to your points because we're going to take a break. And on the spot, we'll be right back. And when we come back, I'll open the line so that you too at home can be a part of this discussion. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone and call us. And if you disagree, that's okay. But remember to disagree with respect. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amar. My guests tonight are, I have Penna Ahebwa, Hani Malinga, and Koti Paul Lakuma. Penna, let me begin with you in this last segment of our discussion on the issue of the pipeline. The pipeline will be, the longest part is going to be in the Republic of Tanzania. And I'm told this is going to be the longest pipeline anywhere in the world. But also, it means Tanzania will forever have leverage because they have the pipeline. What if they decide one day to increase on the levy? What if we have a political disagreement with Tanzania? Like we've had political disagreements with some countries in the region because that seems to be the norm nowadays. That's risky, isn't it?
You can say so, although that risk has been hedged in a way within the commercial agreements that have been signed, including the intergovernmental agreement that was signed between the two countries, and clearly they agreed to help us go through their country at no cost in terms of they call it the transit fee. and that's why actually we opted for that route. So that is well entrenched within the intergovernmental agreement. If there is any change, then there are mechanisms to address that change. But also we have host government agreements between the EACOP company and Uganda, and then the EACOP company with Tanzania. Even there, those risks have been well hedged within those commercial agreements, and if at all they happen, then there are also mechanisms to sort them out. But the relationship between this country and Tanzania is so rich, so we really do not foresee such a circumstance.
Well, we have a relationship with other countries which are supposed to be even more closer than the Republic of Tanzania, but we have had our own issues. I hope you have heard about the Gazprom problem between Russia and Europe, and which they are using as leverage. And right now, the Western Europe and the United States are so worried that because gas is coming from Russia and is like the main supplier of gas into Europe, especially Germany, and then they are using that as a leverage. Probably you're taking your lessons from such a scenario.
Yes, and I must say there are a number of other synergies I think we are trying to work out with that country, including being able to export or import their gas into Uganda. So my conviction is that with such synergies, some of those unfortunate circumstances you're talking about, we may not see them in our case, because the corridor right now that is going to be used for the pipeline is also being planned for maybe a parallel gas pipeline coming from Tanzania to Uganda. So I don't foresee those problems given some of these synergies that are opportunities for Tanzania itself.
We are in a volatile region. The Eastern Central Africa area, the Great Lakes region, you have a war in Eastern Congo that never seems to end. You have negative forces there. You have a war in South Sudan, instability in South Sudan. And those areas, unfortunately, are also closer to Albert and Graben. That will always be hanging on the head of Uganda like the proverbial sword of Damocles, because you know that anything can happen in that region. In fact, just yesterday, hundreds of people had run from Congo into Busunga, Bundubujo, and into Nyahuka. Why? Because of the scare of the ADF rebel attack just there. And this is the same Albert and Graben. You cannot have an investor who thinks there's always a gun roaring across the border and then they invest their money. That will be a problem for a long time, considering those two countries are sovereign states that in some cases, unless they invite you, you can't get in.
Yes, it is true that an investor can't go where there is fire, but within the region, there are different mechanisms in place. For example, as we talk now, we know that Uganda is in Congo in order to make sure that ADF is flushed out. But also we have agreements in place, the 1990 agreement, which later we made an addendum, whereby in case if there's a problem, we do the thing. If you go to Sudan, the same arrangement. So we are trying to make sure that we really don't go to those extremes.
Yeah, I'm giving an example that just yesterday, there was an influx of Congolese from just around the border area coming into Bundubujo through Busunga and, taking camp in Nyahuka. Why? Because of a scare just across the border, even though we have the UPDF in the Congo. Things like these, and they were reported by international media, will scare away. And remember, we have not yet done the FID for the refinery. So we're not yet out of the woods, are we?
Yes, but I think the bigger government is handling that. And I think with this type of media, we have to make sure that we make people feel positive rather than scaring them. Because these wars have been there. I remember in 2007, we had serious issues on Lake Albert, but it didn't stop the activity. So it is those negative forces which try to
We actually had a disagreement with Congo over an island called Rukwanzi in Lake Albert.
Do you know where Rukwanzi is? I went there.
Yes.
And it is just because...
yeah, but the Congolese were claiming Rukwanzi to be their island. I remember, I think there was a British employee of either Heritage or Talo.
That's the case of...
Who was killed on that island.
Yeah.
No, it was not that island. That incident which happened in 2007, these people were doing some work on Lake Albert, but it was not in the Rukwanzi. Rukwanzi is on the southern tip of Lake Albert. So the thugs, I don't want to use that word, they had come to rob the facility which on that boat. And when they send a signal to these people at the Buuka in order to go and rescue, is when that incident happened. And we eventually had the Ngurudoto agreement. We sat and agreed on many things.
So did you agree on Rukwanzi?
Rukwanzi is supposed to be remarked to know whether it is in Uganda or it is in the Congo side, depending on, basing on the 1915 agreement, February 1915.
So, Paul, there's a possibility that that whole region could be endowed with oil in the side of Congo and also South Sudan. So is there a mechanism in the future whereby the central processing unit, if I may call that, in Bulisa, in Kingfisher and Talenga, could also bring in oil from those areas and then Uganda becomes the real hub?
Yeah, that's how I wanted to look at it, because like skirmishes with friendly nations, with sister nations, it's as old as mankind, like Director Malinga was saying. We cannot refuse to invest or to exploit a resource because there is a possibility that there's going to be conflict. We must also not only look at the conflict, but the opportunities offered by being close to the sisterly nations or the friendly nations. Some of the opportunities is what you have mentioned. There is oil cutting across the Rift Valley there, even towards the Congo side, and Uganda could become a hub because we are a fast mover. We have the facility. It could be cheaper to process the resource from Uganda, and that's an advantage for us because that comes with tariffs. Also, the demand for supplies of goods and services. Like if we use some of these investments to develop our agricultural sector, then we could also supply Congo with the food. Yeah, our aim is to supply the oil region and the influx of population coming to the oil region, but we could end up also supplying that southern eastern side of Congo and making much more money than we could have imagined. So while we are in an area, the Great Lakes region is an area which is volatile, which could cook up anytime, but also there are a lot of opportunities in the Great Lakes region.
So
Tourism,
when we were making these investments, Penina, did we make the investments basing at a price of the barrel of oil to be at a certain, at what price? Because there's also volatility in that. I'm asking this question because there's a time when the barrel came almost to $40. And if you have made your investment thinking maybe you'll sell a barrel of oil at $80, what happens by the time it is 2025 and the barrel is at $30? Big loss for Uganda.
Yeah, every company has a criteria it follows to make a final investment decision, and they will have thresholds, for example, for rates of return. So at the time when we were expecting the FID, I think that was the time when the oil price was really, really low. And they came back to us and say, we are not able to take FID when the rates of return are really not there or they're negative. So, and they were saying for us, at least to be able to take FID, we can assume a price of $50 per barrel and achieve the rate of return that they wanted at a price of $50 per barrel. And at that time, I think the oil price was even lower than 50. But of course, they were foreseeing that it would improve. But for them to be able to take that investment decision, according to their criteria, they needed that minimum rate of return. And that's why we allowed and we adjusted here and there, but we put a hedge for ourselves. that should the oil price, we have adjusted the PSAs or the terms because of you know, the low price environment, but should the oil price improve and be, for example, 75 and above, there is an extra fiscal term that we put there, which we call the windfall tax. So we adjusted a bit just for us to be able to take FID. But should the oil price be better, 75 and above, we will recoup what we kind of gave away for the sake of FID.
And at what price is the barrel as of today?
I think we are in the region of over 70. We are over 70.
85 or 85.
We've been around 80, 70 there.
So now, if we have our refinery up and running and produces oil, isn't there a possibility that our oil can be produced at a higher price than what is coming from Aramco in Saudi Arabia, because for them they are enjoying economies of scale? By the time it reaches Tanzania at the port, it could be a bit higher in price than what is coming from Saudi Arabia.
You know, the way we price these commodities, because they're international commodities. Okay. So, for example, you will look at the price of that Saudi Aramco crude at Mombasa or in Tanzania, and that is where you start from.
Okay, so you have to join the cartel and
yes.
You have to join the cartel and sell at that, because the cartel is enjoying economies of scale. They can put at a certain level and be able to make money, and maybe you will not be able to do the same. That's my worry.
Yeah, and
yet you have to sell according to the international price.
Yeah, the only difference would be now you will be eating into your rate of return. So what you need to do is to cut on your costs to be able to fit in the prevailing price.
I'm asking this question, Paul, because I understand there's a neighboring country enjoying a cost that they tried to build. They tried to build a refinery, but they haven't been using that refinery because eventually what they would produce wouldn't compete with what is coming refined from other parts of the world.
Of course, there are the economics of refinery, and I think Uganda has done enough studies already to try to see the feasibility of the refinery, and I think the decision which has been taken is based on the results of some of those studies and also field visits. And I've had some officials travel to Chad as a refinery, and they check the issues there. World Bank had concerns with the Chad refinery. Kenya used to have a refinery.
Yeah, in fact, I was meaning Kenya.
Yeah, in Chagamwe, in Mombasa, but before they were a producer. Kenya used to refine oil.
Imported crude.
Yeah, imported crude before they were a producer. It became inefficient before even they discovered the oil. But there are also discussions of the advantages of having a refinery. Of course, one of them is self-sufficiency, and especially if you have ambitions of industrializing, I think it's a very good tool to advance your industrialization agenda. Because then you produce crude for your domestic market, and you're able to sell it at a cheaper price to the industrialist. So if you have an industrialization agenda, like Uganda has one, then having a refinery is an advantage. But like Penina put it earlier, what if you produce surplus? What do you do with it? That's why you also have to have in your portfolio, you have to have some of it going to the pipeline for export, so that you balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the line so that you two at home or wherever you are, you can call us and tell us what you think about the oil and gas sector now that we have FID done, which everybody said that was a glorious day for Uganda. What do you make of that? So the numbers are going to be on the screen. Call us and tell us what you think. You tell us your name and where you are, and if you have a specific question to a specific guest, please mention it so that that guest can be able to respond to you. We're almost coming to the end of our show, but I wanted to know what area, Mr. Director Malinga, has been explored for oil, because there's a possibility that in our country here, we could all be seated in oil, even right here where we are.
The areas which we have so far explored is the Albertine Graben, which follows the Albertine Rift. We are doing some initial studies in the Kadam-Moroto Basin. In
Karamoja.
Karamoja. Then the northern part of Lake Choga will be the next. So those are the areas. Now, there was a question about the infrastructure. As we were talking with the Tanzanians, our neighbors from DRC picked interest. They want to see if they can also join to have the infrastructure for their future prospects in the Eastern Congo. Likewise, even South Sudan. So you might find the CPF of Tilenga can be a center for receiving product.
Let me open the line for some Ugandans who want to speak to us tonight. I have a caller online. Hello. 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 Yes, sir. What's your name and where are you calling from?
David from Buseruka, Hoima.
David from Buseruka in Hoima, right into the oil fields. Tell us what you want to say tonight.
I want to talk to Catholic for Penina,
Penina, yes?
about public relations with the local, so those who are neighboring what? Neighboring the airport.
In Kabali.
They say that a lot of people are opening the road, what? And those people who are neighboring the airport, they relax with the gates of those gates of there. For them, they're talking from Kampala, they're going to report. When they come from Kampala, they come and listen, they go back and find themselves, oh, Kampala, that is that. A pastor from the village that does not get anything from them. Those people who are experienced from, there is a nearby where they
From Kabali.
So for another place, they build for them houses and land titles that are not being given to them.
Kinyamasuga.
In Yamasoka.
Yes, I know the place.
The other side, they are built for them, the houses, they don't know where that land is there, so because they don't have land titles.
All right, thank
So
you.
I just wanted to get the difference of that area, however.
I think that is so good to get a call from Buseruka right there. So I think this is what I was telling you, that sometimes people feel this. Thank God we got this fellow from Buseruka.
Well, I think he's talking about land acquisition issues.
And no benefit to the people you see there, to the people in Buseruka. He doesn't see any benefit.
Okay, on the land acquisition issues, I think Mr. Malinga should be able to speak to them. But in terms of benefit, maybe we haven't reached everyone. But I can say, especially for the airport, the biggest percentage of people who are working on that airport have been sourced from the area. And that is going to be the same.
Are you aware also that Kabale and the areas of Buseruka had actually been encroached on by people who were not really the original inhabitants of that area? So when you came to compensate, you actually never compensated the right people, owners of the land.
Okay, that is for Mr. Malinga, I think, to speak.
That one is for people from that region.
Okay.
Now, for us, what we did, the one we got on the ground is the one we compensated. If we a tenant, definitely we looked for the landlord.
Hold on to your point. Let me get another caller, then you can conclude with that response. I have a call online. Hello. Hello. I have a caller online. Hello. Okay. I think I'm having comms challenges to reach that caller.
Yes.
Please, Director Malinga.
Okay. On the issue of the titles, it's true it has taken long. Transfer forms were signed in November 2019, but it's a process. We had to transfer those titles from Ministry of Energy. First of all, we had to subdivide, transfer them to Ministry of Energy. Then from there, now we are transferring them to the landowners now, the current one. And as we talk now, Those titles are in Masindi. They are being provided certificates. So soon it will be another
Where
ceremony.
did an organization or a company called Strategic International start and end their job there? Because they are dealing with the compensation and things like that.
They're still working.
Strategic International is
Yes,
there.
yes, yes. That process of concluding those title transfers, they're still doing it. It is not only people from Hoima, but even the churches. Because you find the Hoima diocese, they signed the transfers, they have never got them, but they are coming. Yeah.
And what about the people you said there are those who said we don't want to be given money, we want the government to build for us.
Those are the people.
And then and then there was that place, I think in a village called Kinyamasoga, where we are building some homes for them, but then you sort of built a camp instead.
That's not a camp, Patrick. It's not a camp. Actually, it is a city.
Kinyamasoga city.
If you go there, there's the infrastructure. There's now a community building, community house. It is being built. There's electricity. We are putting water. There's a school. Actually, somebody was saying it should be part of the university because the infrastructure is too much for the existing community. Then the remaining part is for farmland.
So how much acreage did every homestead get for farming?
It depended on what you had before. If you had 10 acres, we gave you 10 acres. A quarter an acre where your house is located, the balance as a farmland. There are access roads, everything. Actually, soon some people are going to buy off these people. That's why some people say if they get the titles, they will sell off. And you'll find the workers will be working within that area. That will be an estate.
But the complaint was that because people in ministries, departments, and agencies of government in the area of petroleum knew what was coming ahead, went and bought off the local people, gave them some cheap money, and then waited for the bigger compensation.
Not only MDS, even people from Bunyoro bought themselves.
Yeah, but I'm talking about those people who had privy, those who had information, insider information. But anyway,
there's a willing buyer and a willing seller. So
yeah, but the willing seller with no information is taken advantage of.
Yeah,
that is the issue.
But I think we need to, as a media, and we need to manage some of those stories because they can work negatively towards the sector. Yeah, it's not all those stories are true. That people with prior information went and bought.
I know, for example, that in that area there was a complaint that the people were compensated were not local Wanyoro, and so people had come on a land that was not theirs. I heard that. I was there when people were being evicted from Kabale. I was following them up. That's why sometimes it's not my area. That's why I can even know the villages from one point to another because I talk to them. But I also know of some people who were very happy that the refinery came. There's this lady who had, separated with her husband for many years, and because the land was owned together with the husband, they could not give them the money. They told the man, "We need your wife here, so that we can give you money for compensating your land." So this man had to go and look for the woman to come and put a signature. And you know what the woman said? Said, "I don't want anything else. For me, I love the refinery. It brought my man back." And that's all what she wanted. But our time is out. Let me begin with you, Paul. You give us your concluding remark tonight.
Yeah, just to continue with your point, maybe manage expectations. There are two sides of expectations. There's a positive side, which can be overblown. And then there's a negative side, which is some of those stories, if at all they're not true, about people, speculators buying land and stuff like that, or prospects of an environmental spillover, or prospects of leakages in the oil revenue, or like disagreement about the resource. So we need to manage those two sides of the story. One, overblowing the story, And then the negative sides also. It could spoil for the sector. So we as the people who are knowledgeable and the superintendents of the sector who are here and the media have a role to play to always try to tell the truth and not to overblow the expected benefits and not to overblow the negative stories also. We need to manage the expectations of the people, in short.
All right. Director Malenga.
Yes, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It has really been a hot spot to some of us. Back to people of Seruka, we want to assure you that we are doing our best to make sure that you get what you deserve. And I want to use this media to thank one of the leaders in Seruka, by the name is called Ali Tinkamanyire. He has been a supporter of this project. Unfortunately, he could not make it on first because we had invited him specifically to come and attend the function. He has worked hard to guide the locals to make sure that the project progresses. But on the other side, I want to assure Ugandans that yes, the FID has been announced. Let us now move in a positive direction.
All right, and Penna, your parting shot.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I actually came prepared to kind of break down what FID should mean to Ugandans. Unfortunately, the conversation went another direction.
But this was the first question. What does it mean? And why was this a glorious day? I remember that's what I asked.
Well, let me use these few minutes
Okay.
to just emphasize that the impact of this FID is really huge on the economy at macro level, but also micro level. Now, for a Ugandan, like the CEO of Total indicated, FID means for those major contracts that were pending are now going to be concluded shortly. A number of them have already been concluded, and I think the value is around 6 billion. Most of these contracts have huge opportunities for subcontracting, for joint venturing, Ugandans. We also have Ugandans that are at tier level in those big contracts between the contractor and the licensee, but those are very few. So majority of the opportunities are at subcontractor level, and most of the opportunities are being advertised. Most of them fall within the 16 areas that are ring-fenced for Ugandans. And so we would like to call upon Ugandans to look out for these opportunities and to take them on. One of the requirements, the first step, is to register on the National Supplier Database. It's free. It's done online. You can do it in your bed, in your home. So we need to grab that opportunity. But also, I want to say FID comes with a lot of training opportunities. Recently, Total launched the MOOC, which is the Mass Open Online Course, free for Ugandans. It's done online, and the minimum that you need is an S6 certificate. So Ugandans need to drop to pick that up, and it's aimed at training over 120 Ugandans who will be employed during the operations phase. I also want to emphasize that a lot of demand is going to be brought on board by the development phase. It calls for preparation in areas of providing foodstuffs, providing housing, providing healthcare facilities. Those who are able, these are some of the areas that you need to go into. The returns are for sure, I can tell you. The other areas I must emphasize on is the macroeconomic impact of this FID, whereby like I said, at contracting level, we are emphasizing some of those services that we are not able to provide as Ugandans. Those companies, the foreign companies, should come and domicile here. And that means a lot for our taxation. And again, in terms of macroeconomics, this FID, achieving this FID, the $10 billion project, and the kinds of companies that we have been able to attract. These are world-class companies. That unlocks a lot in terms of investment as a country. It improves our investment rating as a country, and so my expectation is that this country is going to be unlocked for investment, not only in oil and gas, but also in other sectors. In oil and gas, we expect that this has unlocked investment in exploration, but also in the refinery, and so we need to grab the opportunity. The suppliers out there, you need to register on the NSD. If you're trained in any area and you think you have some competencies that are required, you need to register on the National Oil and Gas Talent Register. Otherwise, we celebrate with all of you Ugandans upon this milestone.
All right. Pen Ahewa, Director Malinga, Hani Malinga, and Koti Paul Kuma. I want to thank you so much for your time, but most of all, for your for what you have contributed, your insights in the area of oil and gas. And for those of you who have been watching this program, I want to thank you for a great company. And Pen, it was good to see you again, because we were in school together at one point. Yeah. All right, good night, and God bless Uganda.